Okay. How many strums before you're going to start
1, 2, 3.
singing? Okay.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our Wednesday video. I'm Pastor Michelle.
And I'm Pastor Greg, and we've got some fun things I hope for you today, so let's get going.
All right, everyone, we're back with the Fruits of the Spirit lessons that we began a few weeks ago. I'm going to read to you again where we get that from the Bible, the fruits of the Spirit. That's from the book of Galatians, chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. Paul wrote, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against things like this." So this week we're going to be talking about peace as one of the fruits of the Spirit. Peace is sometimes what you think about, like when you've been fighting with someone. Maybe you've been with a friend or your brother or sister and you got in a little fight about, whose turn it was or who wanted to do what, and you kind of get into a little argument or discussion about that, and you think, well, let's make peace and solve that problem so that we can be at peace with one another. And that's an important part of having peace, and that is also a gift of the Spirit, being able to make peace with one another. But there's another kind of peace that we want to talk to you about today, and that's having peace in your heart or in your soul when everything around you seems chaotic. And maybe that's how you feel right now, that everything around you is chaotic. There's a lot of different things happening these days. Your schedule isn't the same as it used to be. Your parents aren't doing the same things that they've normally done. Everything seems to be kind of topsy-turvy. And that can make me nervous inside, and that can make me really frustrated and agitated inside. But when I do that, I like to get away from all of those worries and try to find peace in my soul or peace in my heart. And so I want to share with you something that I found quite a long time ago on a trip to Guatemala. Pastor Greg and I went back a long time ago to visit this country called Guatemala. And I picked these up. These are, you can see there's a little box right here. And you can open it up. And on the inside are these little dolls. Can you see them? There we go. These are little Guatemalan worry dolls is what they're called. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the table and tell you about what those are for. When Guatemalan children get worried about things going on in the world, or maybe they're just worried about things that probably will never happen, but they worry about it anyway, they will take one of these little teeny tiny dolls, and they will tell their worries to it and talk about how maybe I'm worried about, my friends not getting to play with me, or I'm worried that I don't get to see my grandma right now. And they would tell that worry to their little doll and put it under their pillow, and when they go to sleep, they don't worry about that problem. Their little doll worries about that problem, and so that they don't have to. Well, we have something kind of similar to that. We don't always use dolls to tell our worries to, but we can tell our worries to God. There's a Bible verse about telling our worries to God that comes from the book of 1 Peter in the 5th chapter, the 7th verse. And it talks about how we can let go of our worries and anxieties and fears by telling them to God. The verse says, "Throw all your anxiety onto God because God cares about you." And so it's nice that we have a way that we can get rid of our worries and our fears. We don't need a little worry doll, that we can just talk to God and think about those things that we're worried about and lay those onto God. There's a song I'm going to sing about that in just a minute. But I do want to show you how to make your own worry dolls, because you're not going to be able to go to Guatemala and pick some of these up. I've made a couple of different kinds for you, and let's see if our cameraman can tell me if you can see this right or not. I've got this one that I made using a spoon.
Bring it around.
Okay.
No, bring it
okay,
around.
bring it around this way. This one I made using a spoon, and you can see I drew a little face on the spoon, and then I used yarn and wrapped it all around the spoon so that I could make a little doll out of it. And then this is just a popsicle stick or a craft stick that I used with a marker. And I drew a face on there, and I drew just some clothes or whatever colors I wanted on there to make it colorful and bright. Well, I'm going to show you how to make one if you do have some yarn at home, or and a popsicle stick or a twig or a pencil or a spoon or a fork or something else like that. You can just take that stick, and at the part where you want your dolls to start, you just start by putting some yarn around. I'm going to leave a little bit hang because I'm going to tie it shut later. And then you just wrap it around and around and around. I've got really bright colors here because in Guatemala a lot of their clothes are very, very brightly colored. So there's the green. And then I've got some blue and orange that I kind of put together. That was a little challenging. I'm going to wrap that around. Oops. Wrap it around and around and around. I got the green caught in there, but that's all right. Wrap that around and around and around and around. And I'm going to put one more color. I'm going to use some of this yellow, and I'm going to continue to wrap it. I might even go up a little bit and make some kind of stripies. It doesn't matter how you do it, just however you want to wrap the yarn or color your doll. And then if you have some excess on the back, I'm just going to tie that into a little knot, just like I was tying a shoe, right there. And there is your own worry doll you can tell your worries to, or you can simply pray to God and share your worries or cast your cares upon Him.
Okay, so we have a Bible story about Jesus bringing peace in a way. It's a really dramatic miracle story from the Bible. It's found in the Gospel of Mark in the 4th chapter, beginning with the 35th verse, and it goes to the end of the chapter there. So what happens in that story is that Jesus and the disciples have gone out onto a lake, and they're trying to cross to the other side, and it's night. And Jesus is sleeping in the boat, and the other disciples are awakened. They're woke up because there's a big storm going on, and it's blowing, and it's very frightening. Now, in that boat, you had some of the disciples that were not familiar with boats, so probably as soon as the wind started blowing and started to happen, they probably started to get really nervous and afraid. But then they really got afraid because a lot of Jesus' disciples were fishermen, and they spent most of their life in a boat, and even they were afraid the storm was getting so bad, and they were sure that the boat was going to capsize and they were going to drown in the lake. But this whole time, Jesus was still asleep. And so finally one of them frantically woke up Jesus and said, "Aren't you afraid that we're all going to drown?" And Jesus got up and he looked around and he spoke to the storm, and he told the storm to be calm, to be at peace. And the storm calmed down, and they were able to float to the other side of the lake. So like I said, it's a really dramatic story about the power of God and Jesus and how He could work miracles. But it's also a story that tells us about what Jesus can do in our lives, in that Jesus can calm the storms of our life. Pastor Michelle was talking about when we're anxious and how we can hand those worries and those chaos and that time things get crazy over to God and pray to God. And this is what Jesus can do in our lives, is take those things, those little fears that we have because we just don't know what's going on, and those big fears that we have because we know what's going on and we know it's scary. that Jesus can take all of those things and calm our hearts and calm our minds and calm our spirits if we give those things over to Jesus, like it said in 1 Peter. So what I have here is a little experiment, and I'm going to tell you the same thing I did that I'm going to tell you during the games. I think that's actually coming later in the video. But I'm going to tell you, before you do any of this, make sure that a grown-up in your house is with you and gives you permission. Now, when I say that, if you do this without permission and then you get in trouble and you come back and they say, where did you figure out to do that and who told you could do that? And you say, well, Pastor Greg said I could do it. I'm going to show them the video where I told you, make sure that you have an adult help you. But anyway, so what we have here are, what you need is 3 ingredients to do this. And then I would put 2 of those ingredients in little cups because it makes this work a lot quicker and easier and safer. So the 3 ingredients, you need some vinegar, you'll need about this much vinegar, about 2 inches, or about that much vinegar in a glass. And then you want some baking powder, baking soda, I'm sorry, baking powder doesn't work, baking soda. And then you also want some this is canola oil, some sort of vegetable oil. And what you're going to do, you have the vinegar in here, and then in one hand you hold the baking soda, in the other hand you hold the oil. When you put the baking soda in the vinegar, oh, one other important thing I almost forgot. Notice I have a big tray here with a lip on it. So you want to get like a tray or a cookie pan because this is going to spill. And so you want it to be caught up in that tray and not get all over the counter. Very important. So find yourself a cookie pan or something. Okay, so I'm going to put this in there and then it's going to bubble up and then watch what happens when I put the oil in. So I put this in and then it creates a big storm, but when I pour the oil in, the storm starts to calm. It's still boiling, and then all of a sudden, the oil catches and the storm calms down. So at that moment, that's like when they woke up Jesus, and it just calmed the storm right down. So that's our little story, our little experiment, and I'm gonna demonstrate it again with the camera close up so you can see what happens from the top, because that's where it looks really good, especially if you don't get a chance to do this at home. All right, so we're going to do this one more time so you can watch closely. So here's my baking soda and here's my oil. So when the baking soda goes in, that's like when the storm really gets to raging, and the storm is raging, and then they go in and putting in the oil is like them going in and waking up Jesus, and they wake him up and he looks around and he sees what's going on, and then he tells the storm to calm. And just as the oil calms the bubbles in the water, Jesus calmed the storm. All right, so we've got a little game that you might try. It can be really as few as 2 people. Now, we've got our whole family here to try that out. They're over there. You'll see them in a minute when we go to play the game. But you just need a couple of things. You need something to mark the floor with. If you're inside, I suggest masking tape because it'll stick, but it doesn't stick very hard, and you can pull it up really easy. And then you need something you can throw around that won't break furniture or your friends and family. And so we're using these little snack cups to throw around. And so the first thing that we're going to do, wait, before I go any further, I need to put a little a note on this. Please ask an adult in your house before you try this game. Because if you try it without asking an adult, and then they ask you, where did you get this crazy idea that you could do this? And you said, well, Pastor Greg said I could do it. I'm going to show them the video that shows me telling you to ask an adult. So make sure you do that. Okay. So anyway, so you take the tape.
We're going to make a boat.
And we're going to start by making the stern of the boat, the very front, the stern of the boat, right?
Right.
The front of the boat is the stern?
The bow of the boat.
The bow of the boat is the front of the boat. Okay, so we make a piece of tape there.
And if you're outside and want to do this game, you could maybe use some sidewalk chalk and make your boat.
Okay, then we make a nice long side of the boat. And then we make the back of the boat. We got talking over there while we're doing this. Okay.
That's good.
Back we
Front of the
make
boat.
another side of the boat.
Sounds like ships and sailors to me.
Okay, side of the boat. Okay. And
Last,
we've got
the rest of the
front
boat.
of the boat.
Okay, front of the
So
boat.
there's our boat.
Back of the boat.
There you go.
But-
And then we're going to have Beth Ann and Pastor Michelle will get in the boat. There are disciples.
All right, give me high
This goes
five.
with our
right.
boat on the storm. And then this is our water that we're putting all around the outside. And then me and the boys, we are going to be the storm, and we're going to try to fill the water with boat, while the disciples, Pastor Michelle and Beth Ann, try to get the water out of the boat. Okay, ready, set, oh, look at the storm! The storm's coming! We need storm noises.
Jump in!
All right, keep going, keep going. So there you have it. That is
We need more disciples.
disciple storm boat thing. Thanks. Have fun.
Well, that's our show for today. We're so glad you tuned in and watched all about peace, for the fruit of the Spirit. That is peace that we talked about as something that we have inside of our hearts when we're worried about what's going on around the outside of us. When we feel like it's a storm raging around us and we're in a boat, we can ask God for peace, and that's a gift of the Spirit.
So we will finish up. Wait a second. You had a shout out.
I do. I have a late shout out. We didn't get it in for filming last week, but this says, thanks for your patience, hard work, and time understanding these last couple of weeks. Wyatt, I love you. And that's from Wyatt Heiss's mom.
All right. So now, as we always do, we will finish our time together with a repeat after me prayer. So if you could join me in prayer. Dear God,
Thank you for boats.
and for stories,
And for the gift of peace.
help us to share
All our worries.
with God in Jesus Christ.
Who cares for us?
And grants us peace.
In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
See you
See you
next
next
time.
time.